everyone, this is Celine from Blue Calla Patterns. Welcome to video 3 for the Coneflower Cross Body Bag. If you've already completed videos 1 and 2, this is what you should have at this point. You should have your assembled flap attached to one of your exterior body panels, and you should have your second exterior body panels with your magnetic snaps installed, and you have your other half of your snaps on this side. So we're just going to set these aside for now, and we're going to assemble our exterior gusset. So you'll need your gusset bottom, which has your Peltex inside with your foam interfacing basted to the wrong side. You should also have your side gusset pieces also interfaced and foam attached on the back. Now, one thing at this point, one thing I should mention, if your machine doesn't like thicknesses, what I would recommend doing at this point is to trim away some of the foam from the seam allowance. So you'll want to just undo your basting stitches here and here on the shorter ends, and just cut away 3/8 of an inch of your foam interfacing. And you'll want to do the same thing for the bottom edge of your side gusset pieces. If you prefer, you can also do it at the top here. I have a tendency to not do this, only because I know that my machine will handle the layers just fine. But if you're really not sure, and even if you just prefer to reduce the bulk, you can go ahead and do that now. So now we're going to sew up our side connectors and attach them to our side gusset pieces. Just going to set this aside for now. So on your side gusset pieces, on the wrong side, you're going to want to draw some lines along the center. And because they're 3 inches, you'll want to do that at exactly 1.5 inches, and you'll want to do that on both pieces. Okay, so now in the pattern, I mentioned putting a strip of double-sided tape if you're using cork or vinyl. If you're using fabric, what you'll do at this point is you'll just go over to your ironing board, and you're going to fold in both halves, wrong sides together, so that the outer edges are at the center line, and you're just going to press your strap in this way. Now, if you're using vinyl or cork, you can put the strip of double-sided tape. I'm actually not going to put the tape. I don't like to take the chance to gum up my needles, but if you have double-sided tape that is made to sew through, you can go ahead and use that. I'm just going to head over to my machine, and I'm actually just going to fold each half in towards the center, and I'm going to sew it in place as I'm folding. I'm going to go ahead and move my camera over, and you can see how I sew these up. Okay, so I'm going to take one connector, and I'm just going to fold the 1/2 in towards the center line, and then I'm going to sew this in place, and I use about a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance away from the center line. And I just fold and I sew. Okay, when I get to the bottom, I just rotate, and then I sew across, and then I do the same and sew up the other side. I just fold and sew. And then when I'm done this one, I'll do exactly the same thing for the second connector. Okay, so I finished sewing my side connectors. Now I'm going to take one of the connectors and a rectangle ring, and you just slip your connector through the ring and then fold the connector onto itself. You want the side with the exposed raw edges at the center, you want those to be inside, so you're folding wrong sides together. And then fold it 2.5 inches. So you want this part here that's folded over to be 2.5 inches. That's 2 inches. Okay, like so. And then just use some clips and hold it in place. Okay, and then do the same thing for the second one. Okay, just compare them, make sure that they're the same length. Okay, that looks good. Okay, now you're going to use your tape, and I want you to just tape the portion where you will not be sewing. So, like this. And then I usually stop taping about 1/2 inch or so from the bottom, so that when I'm sewing my seams here, I won't be sewing through the tape. Okay. Okay, so now we want to take our side gusset pieces and we want to find the center. The center is about 1 7/8 of an inch from either corner, and I like to mark the center on the top and the bottom. And this is just to make sure that I'm sewing on the connector straps directly in the center. Okay, so now you peel the backing, and then you use the center marks to position your strap in the middle, and then press. Okay, and then I'm going to take this over to my machine, and I'm going to start at the bottom edge here, and I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to go and sew straight at the top, and then I'm going to rotate. I'm going to sew across the bottom, and then rotate again and sew down to this bottom edge. And I'm going to do the same thing for both. Okay, both side connector straps are sewn, and I'm just going to add some rivets. I don't have room for a lot of templates in my studio, but I did splurge and get these rivet templates from By Piera, and they are a huge time saver. Now I don't have a rivet press. I actually bought one and didn't care for it, so I'm going to set these with anvil and hammer. So I'm going to not do that on video because no one will appreciate that noise. Okay. Just gonna punch out the holes. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video here, and I'm just going to set my rivets. Okay, so I've set my rivets, and these are ready to attach to your gusset bottom piece. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you're not sure if your machine will like all the bulk, here's what I suggest doing. Just remove the basting stitches at the end. And then just trim away about 3/8 of an inch here of your foam. And then I'll do the same for this side. I really need a new seam ripper. This one is not very sharp. Okay. Trim away. Now, it might be enough for you to just remove this from this piece. If you're really not sure, you can also remove it from the bottom of these two pieces, but you should do that before you sew on your connectors. Okay, so attaching these is really quite simple. Make sure that you're attaching this bottom edge. And then I'm just going to clip this one on the other side right away so I don't have to come back. Okay, and then I'm going to go over to my machine. I'm going to sew both of these in place. Okay, so these are now attached to the gusset bottom. And now we're going to, if you're using fabric, you're going to press the seam allowance towards the gusset bottom, and then you're going to top stitch the seam allowance along both outer edges of the gusset bottom piece. Okay, so our gusset is completely assembled now. We just have to mark the center at the bottom. So fold it in half, right sides together, and then when I fold it in half, to make sure that I have it perfectly folded in half, what I do is I just match up the side seams here where we attach the side gusset to the gusset bottom. And I do that on both sides, and then I flatten it as much as possible. This can be a little bit difficult because you have that Peltex in the bottom. If you don't want to fold it, you can also just measure and find the center. Okay, here we go. And now we're going to take our first body panel, and when you clip these together, I find it easier to clip this way with my body panel facing up. And the trickiest part of attaching the gusset to the body panels is the corners, but I will show you a little trick to make that easier. So I usually start by pinning the bottom centers together, and you are pinning right sides together, and then I go up and I pin the top corners together. Okay, and then pin the rest except for the corners. When we get to the corners, we're actually going to clip a little bit to sort of ease it into the corner. Okay, so I just clip a tiny bit. You have to make sure you're not clipping too much because you don't want to clip, if you clip more than 3/8 of an inch, you're clipping into where you're going to be sewing your seam allowance. So I usually clip about 1/4 of an inch. And it just helps it sit in there a little bit better. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to take this over to the machine and I'm going to start sewing at one top corner, backstitch, and then sew all the way down. When you get to the bottom corner, take your time and maneuver your bag. So you lift your foot and you kind of readjust the position of the bag so that you don't get any puckers on either side. Take your time when you're doing the corners, and it's worth it because then you have really nice corners when you're done. Now, in terms of sewing with the body facing up or the gusset facing up, I found my testers were sort of half and half on what they preferred. So experiment and figure out which position you prefer when you're sewing these pieces together. Okay, so I've sewn the one body panel to my gusset, and there's the view from the side. Now I'm just going to do exactly the same for the second body panel. And then once this body panel is attached, all you do is trim your seam allowance. Don't trim it too close. And then turn your bag right side out. And then we'll move on to video 4, which is assembly of the lining.